Welcome to the Heal, Thrive, Dream podcast, where trauma survivors become healthy thrivers. Each month, we'll feature a theme in the trauma recovery and empowerment field. To promote your recovery, healing, and learning how to build dreams, here's your host, Karen Robinson, transformational coach and therapist.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Heal, Thrive, Dream podcast. Today, I am so fortunate, and you're fortunate too, because the Kavanagh sisters are with us. This is the first time that we've had three sisters on a call together. And it's also, I think, our first guest for Ireland as well. So it's a pretty special day. So I'm going to, for YouTubers, excuse me looking away to read their bio a little bit. My memory is not what it used to be. So that's my excuse. But I want to do them justice by taking a minute to introduce them properly. Okay. So on the show today, we have Joyce, June, and Paula, for those YouTubers who can see them. Okay. And for the podcast too, I want you to know who we're talking about. So the Kavanagh sisters, Joyce, June, and Paula. And if you were wondering, no, June was not born in June. So she just told me that now. Okay. So the sisters were born into a large family in Ireland in the mid-50s and 60s. They come from a disadvantaged area in Dublin, and all three of them were sexually abused by their father over 2 decades. In 1989, they decided to bring charges against him, and I'm really proud of you guys for doing that. I don't know how many people say that to you all, but I know that was not easy, and especially not easy during the time frame that you all did that. And when they tell their story, they'll share like what was going on in Ireland at the time with sex abuse cases, because not much, right? So in 1990, they made the decision to bring charges. In 1990, the Irish state had a successful case against him. He was convicted and sentenced to a term of 7 years and was released after serving 5 years. Okay. Now, I did not know this part or didn't remember it. I'm going to let them tell you the story though. Like when you guys start talking, I would like to hear about the documentary that I see on your website and also about your book. So people know what you have to offer. Because I think there are a lot of sisters and siblings abused that are listening in. So I think your story can give them hope, one. And two, it's a great example of how telling our story can be part of the healing journey. That's the other thing I think is really great about you guys. Okay. I'm sure there's more great things. So go ahead. Who would like to start by telling me about telling my audience about the documentary that you guys are doing or have done?
It's a silent screen.
Yeah. Tuesday final.
When we made the decision to prosecute our father and then he got sentenced, it was shortly after he got sentenced, a woman that was with the national broadcast here, which is called RTA, approached us and asked us would we do a documentary. At the time they were doing a series of documentaries and it was called A Silent Scream. But the only thing they insisted upon was they really wanted people who were willing to go on camera and not hide your face, not hide your identity, so that the story would come across without the shame that is normally attached to it. And of course, us being us, we just agreed. We didn't even, to be honest, we didn't think that hard about it. We just said, yeah, we'll do anything. And that was how that documentary came about. And then there was awards for it and there was a lot that went on after it. But that was probably, at the time, that was much tougher than we thought it was going to be, because you're in a room on your own with camera crew around you and they're asking you very personal questions. Yes. It was a little bit more difficult than doing the statements at the time. So, yeah. But we don't regret it. It was a really good thing to do. And then my father, who was in jail at the time, took out an injunction against the program and got it stopped. Now, he didn't get stopped for long. Yeah. He stopped it for about 2 weeks. But because he did that, more people actually watched the program. So he did us a favor in the end. Yeah. But he did everything he could to try and stop it, because he still believed he was coming out and was going to just go back to life as normal, like most abusers.
And at the time, any program
depicting victims of sexual abuse, they were all blacked out. They'd be in shadow or in the background, or you'd see the back of their head.
Or their voice would be distorted, so you wouldn't know who you were talking to.
Yeah.
We didn't have a problem at that time. After going through the court case, at that time in Ireland, we weren't given the opportunity to waive our anonymity and speak openly about him. And the press took the decision themselves to not publish either our names or his name,
No, that was
saying they were going to
That
protect.
was the law.
Oh yeah,
It was
and it was to protect us. But we didn't feel it was protecting us. We actually thought it was important that people knew who he was and identified him. But at the time, we didn't have a say. Whereas a lot of people now, things have changed so much now. There's a lot more victims willing to waive their anonymity so that the perpetrator is named.
And even though at the time we were still struggling with the victim mentality and shame and guilt and all that, but we were still, and always have been, really enthusiastic about doing anything we could to help others who were in a similar position, because we were devastated at the lack of information. We couldn't get any help, and we hadn't a clue what was happening to us and our lives.
And all through my father's court case, nobody would tell us anything. We weren't given any information. We certainly weren't given any. He was up quite a few times in court prior to the major court case. But even on the day of his court case, our barrister, it was the first time we met him, but he told us on that day that my father more than likely would just walk free. He said, don't look at that, he's getting off light. But because of his age, he's unlikely to serve a sentence. So everybody was shocked,
Even him,
that the judge
he had
actually
bought-
sentenced him.
We found out he had bought tickets for a dance that weekend, and he was so sure. He went into court with a bag of shopping. He was so blasé about the whole thing. He was convinced that there was no repercussions to be had, and he never admitted guilt. Like, he never displayed remorse, you know.
No, he felt we did something to him.
Yeah.
And also at the time, when we turned up for court on the actual day, we were told, because there were so many of us, it was probably unlikely that we'd all be allowed in the courtroom.
And they were concerned for his safety, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
His safety,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was crazy, but it was like that. Once we made the statement, we were surplus to requirements. They didn't need us. So they told us nothing.
Yeah.
And afterwards, speaking to the detectives involved, which they were brilliant, but we wouldn't have felt that at the time. But afterwards speaking, they said they were trying to protect us.
Until the sentence actually was read out, we didn't know who was on our side, because we were so excluded from the whole process, and it was just terrifying from start to finish. The anxiety surrounding the whole situation was unbelievable. And there has been progress made, but very slow. And when
Very
you
little.
consider that was 30 years ago, like, the differences that have occurred are minute, you know, in terms of supporting victims.
And then even taking that into account, on the day he got sentenced, we all had very different reactions to him getting sentenced.
Yeah, I want to hear how each of you reacted to it. That
Like
would be helpful.
when we initially made the decision to prosecute, we didn't do it to be brave or even, to be honest, to punish him. We actually made the decision because we were afraid he was going to go out and abuse somebody else, and we no longer had. We would have been blamed for that.
The truth is, that was Joyce's feelings on it, wasn't it? Do you want to?
I wanted him dead.
I just felt that if he abused somebody, we couldn't pretend we didn't know anymore, that we were just as responsible. We tried everything. We spoke to as many professionals as possible to see what could we actually do here. And the only option available was to prosecute.
Yeah, and Paula was 100% on board with that, because she just wanted him
I wanted him dead,
dead.
and I didn't care how he got there. I just wanted him there quickly.
Now, I, on the other hand, I was actually concerned about him. I know. But I had nightmares at the time that somebody was going to bash him and kick his head in. And I was so upset about the whole process. And I just felt that I said, look, I can't do this. And both of them agreed that was fine. They let me go away and process it. And it wasn't long before I was back and said, no, come on, we're doing it, because I just needed to be able to make a choice, to have the power to make a choice about it. But as soon as I made the choice not to, I realised it was the wrong choice, because he wasn't finished. There was still lots of danger surrounding him for the future and possible future victims, because he was prolific.
Yeah. And it's also remembering, like, even I remember having a conversation, and June had said to Joyce, like, he wasn't all bad. Like, he did do nice things for us.
Oh yeah, abusers have some good qualities too.
Yeah,
That's why some people
Joyce's
believe them.
response-
Now, we
This
didn't,
wasn't the case, Karen, because that was my naivety and my desperation to cling on to some kind of a portion of a good father. And I was trying desperately to,
Makes sense.
pretend that it wasn't that bad. But when I said that, Joyce said, yeah, but, I said, he did do nice things for us. He took us to Butlins and he took us to England. And she said, yeah, but what did you have to do for that? And the penny dropped. And I just thought, like, I was just so naive. We all were. We were really sheltered. Within the abuse, he made sure our lives literally revolved around that house and him. He was the center of the universe. And so we really were, we hadn't a clue what was going on in the world. So although we went to school and played out on the road with other children, we were very naive. And in those times, a lot of children were naive, but we really took it to another level.
And we didn't see our naivety as a good thing. We thought we weren't naive, we were stupid, thick.
Yeah.
As your father would say, you were thick as shit, and we all believed we really were thick. And we did a lot of things to kind of confirm that for ourselves, though, to be honest. Like in school, we certainly weren't the brightest bulbs in the class.
Well, why?
Oh, I
Why?
know, but you see, at the time we didn't understand why we weren't the brightest bulbs in the class. And school for all of us was horrific. It was actually, for lots of times, it felt worse than being raped at home was going to school, because that was a whole other.
Were you bullied at school?
No.
And we were very obedient. We were like mice. We didn't stand out in the crowd. We were very good kids in school. And
Oh, it was just hard to focus maybe?
it was on us. We had nothing left. All our energy was gone on survival. And so were very insulated in our thinking. And so to demand anything extra from us we hadn't got it.
well, we have that kind of understanding now. But at the time, we didn't.
That's true.
And funny enough, like, the only place I ever felt safe was at home.
Yeah.
Which was where all the damage.
The irony of it, yeah.
Like, it's
That's
crazy.
interesting. Yeah.
But it's because you knew the lay of the land. You knew what to expect. Bad as it was, it was familiar and it was all you knew. Whereas in school, anything could have been thrown at you. There was expectations escalating all the time, and we were unable to fulfill them, leading us to just retreat back to what we were always been told, that we were just stupid. We couldn't do it. And that took years for us to realise
That they were right.
That we were fucking
It's so tempting to crack a joke, but yeah. I mean, we all went on to get degrees, and I know personally.
Oh, I did know that.
I went to get that degree just simply to prove that I wasn't stupid. And it took a while.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
It wasn't easy.
the three of you, it's going to be hard to get all the information I would love to see us cover. So I want to know, okay, one, where can people see this documentary? Like, is it?
There's actually a clip on our website.
Okay, so we can go to your website.
Tuesday Files, is it?
Choose the silent screen, but it's on, we have all the videos up on the website.
Okay, so that's the KavanaughSisters.com
Yeah.
to see their documentary. Now, tell us briefly about the book.
Right. We wrote 2 books. The first book we wrote was called Click Click, and we fought to get the name Click Click, simply because how my father summoned you when he was going to rape you was he'd click his fingers. So that was why we called the book Click Click. And it was really important to us to use that name. When we were writing, the first book took us, and not a word of a lie, we don't do things at speed. We're not known for speed. Endurance is probably more us. But it took us 20 years to write the book because we wrote it on, took a break, wrote a bit more, took a break.
Well, it's a painful thing to write. Yeah.
What we did and what we made a conscious decision to do with Click Click was to write in the first person. So when we were writing about abuse, we wrote as the child being abused. Each of us did that in the book. And that was really important to us for lots of things that we didn't even realize at the time. But we made a decision because we wanted to dispel the myths about abuse and people thinking that either the perpetrator thinking they're doing you a favor and they actually only love you, or the child enjoyed it in some way. We really wanted people to know what was going on in a child's mind while you're being abused. That was why the memory, and that's, to be honest, that's why the memories are so difficult for people to read in the book, is because they are in the first person.
Yeah.
Somebody want to jump in?
You're doing great there,
But the other thing we got out right, personally, what I got out right in the first person, and I didn't even realize at the time, was it was the first time when I went back in and I wrote a memory in detail that I was able to see my innocence and that I was a child and that I wasn't guilty. But I was also able to see how he set up different circumstances in my life and different situations and how he played each of us.
Yep.
And how I was convinced all my life that it was only me he was abusing and the girls were the same. And yet when it came to making statements, we were all able to recall walking in and seeing him raping somebody. But as you know, with abuse, how you disassociate and compartmentalize your memories, they were all memories that we definitely shoved away and didn't remember until we were making statements. And to be honest, until we were doing the book, they didn't really come to light. Because up to then, we were all convinced that we were all individuals being abused.
Yeah, and we were convinced also, we would have swore we didn't know about the others.
Yeah.
And we didn't realise that we did know until we started writing the book.
Yeah, because the example we used when he clicked his fingers, and when we each wrote separately, we were saying, when he clicked his fingers, you would freeze and you would hope it wasn't you. And so we got into a conversation after coming together with our writings and saying, well, if you didn't think it was you, who did you think it was? And then we were kind of going, and so we actually did all know about each other, but there's levels of knowing that go on in a house where abuse is taking place and you're protecting yourself just to survive.
Which is,
so it all makes sense now.
And it was that understanding and that delving into that level of detail that helped us to understand my mother's role in what was going on in the house and how I believe she did know, but she knew the same way I knew, that I didn't really know because I'd locked it away, and my mother did exactly the same. And the only difference is my mother went to her grave never delving into what was really going on and what level of it did she know about and didn't she know about, because she never forgave herself. So
she never did?
No, and she got Alzheimer's before she passed. So she
was a victim
the
just
same as us.
As we were.
Yeah.
No, I didn't feel that for a long time. I had more images, more hassle with dealing with my mother than with my father, because he was what he was. You could define him. I couldn't define her.
It wasn't more hassle. It hurts more.
Yeah.
Because the expectations of nurturing and loving protections from a mother that wasn't there, it's just hard to accept because, of the elusive. Yeah. You can't see what you haven't got. You can see what he's doing to you, and he's dynamic and he's in your face. She was just nowhere to be found, and definitely emotionally nowhere to be found, because she protected herself years ago. She found that when she showed affection to any of the kids, they'd get battering her, so to protect us and herself, she would just close off her emotions. Now, it's far more complex than that,
and he was quite a violent man, especially with the first lot of children that came up, the boys. He was a violent man. By the time he got to us, I think that had fizzled out. He didn't need to use violence with us. He could threaten you, and that was and you knew it. And he was aggressive.
Was a culture as well. It was a culture. Adults ruled roost, and you never questioned them. Simply so.
Like, it is hard to imagine that only 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it would have been longer than that was happening.
Yeah.
But like 30 years ago, all this coming out would have been huge. Like, it's everyday occurrence now, but it wasn't at the time.
Yeah, so he didn't get consequences or justice for the physical abuse that was mostly your brothers, right? That you said he was.
No, and they wouldn't even have seen that as a problem because it was happening to everybody.
Right.
So they wouldn't see them as they wouldn't see that as being victimized in any way.
No, any adult at that time could hit you for anything.
I know, but was it maybe worse in your household? Was your dad even more
absolutely.
violent?
Oh, yeah. But I'm just saying, you could be walking down the street and some adult can decide to smack you.
Yeah.
And if you went to your parents with that, they would assume you did something to deserve it. So it would have never been questioned.
That's why children didn't have voices, did they?
No.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
And the corporal punishment going on in the schools and everything at the time. Mm-hmm. So adults just had all the power, and that was...
Now I'm just going to drag you back to the other point you wanted to cover, which was our second book.
Yeah.
Our second book is called Why Go Back? And the title of that was also very important to us. So we wanted to tell people the importance, victims and people who support them, why is it important to go back in and look at your past? And why is it important to go back in and unpick very disturbing moments and years of your life? Why do you need to do that? So our book is called Why Go Back? 7 Steps to Healing from Sexual Abuse. And the reason for that was because we know we wouldn't be where we are today if we hadn't have gone back and really examined what happened to us, why it happened, and then what grew out of that, what behaviours did we develop, what coping mechanisms did we use then that we continue to use as adults that didn't serve us anymore, that actually made our life hell, but we needed to know what they all were And we didn't realise there was actual medical terms for them. There was names for them. There was research. We didn't know attachment disorder existed. As an adult, we didn't think they had any impact on our life, and they had huge impact. And then
social anxiety,
all of dissociation,
syndrome. There's so many.
PTSD. We didn't know we had that. We knew we had all of the symptoms of it, but we didn't know what it was called. So when we were writing the book, they were the things that we benefited most from, was going back in and being able to discover, why do I behave the way I am? Why do I act? Why does that bother me and that doesn't bother me? And being able to figure that out. And why is it hard to have a relationship? Why is it really difficult to maintain one? And why is it really difficult to just live in a normal life when other people seem to be doing it fine? No problem.
Now, did any of you turn to alcohol or drugs?
Oh, yeah.
All of you? Food, alcohol, drugs,
alcohol,
alcohol a lot,
smoking.
Really. No, we didn't.
We're still struggling with that one.
Yeah.
We're working on that one.
Yeah. I can only speak for myself. I have a highly addictive personality, and so if I wasn't overeating, I would have been excessively drinking or smoking. And it was only just nature that stopped me, because the hangovers and the self-hatred just grew so much that I would still have a drink now, but I don't drink the way I used to drink.
No, and you never became an alcoholic. We were always surprised ourselves that we didn't turn to prostitution. Drugs weren't really that available, not to us anyway. And alcohol, we did go for drink. And when we went for drink, we fell out of the pub.
Because what was the point of drinking if you weren't getting plastered? Like, seriously, why would you bother?
Yeah.
That was how we felt. Like, why would you not go out and get hammered?
Yeah, it was a waste of money.
That needs to be plugged in.
Waste of money.
Yeah.
Well, alcohol was your medicine then. Alcohol. Yes.
Sorry, you just keep talking.
Okay.
We're just looking for more power.
Okay, sure. So I think what might be helpful now is each of you take a turn.
Yeah.
Saying like what your biggest struggles were after the abuse, and what are your biggest successes that have come after coping with your abuse. So maybe we'll start with you, Joyce.
Yeah, well,
biggest issues, I suppose I couldn't understand how every aspect of my life was affected by abuse. When we were writing our second book, we had to actually dissect every thought and every belief we ever had and look at where it came from. And it wasn't ours. And to discover it wasn't ours was great and freeing, but also very fearful, because you had to now find your own beliefs, discover who you were.
Yes.
So that was tough and scary, because, as I said, when we wrote our first book, we really believed we had told our story with nothing else. But we'd given that many talks around, people were asking questions, and the answers weren't in the book. So we felt compelled to go back and answer the questions. But to do that, we had to examine ourselves, our own. We didn't know how we got to where we were. We could joke and laugh and still be quite serious about the subject. And we felt, because we have a very good sense of humor, it made it a little more simple and easier for people to hear. Because, you know, we'd hear people leaving the talk and saying, that's a dreadful subject, but I never laughed as much in my life. And they still got the message. Okay. You know what I mean? It was our nature.
Yeah.
So struggle, I mean, it's a constant struggle and it'll never end, but definitely there is a self-awareness now that is constantly growing. And I suppose that in itself is probably my biggest achievement, to be conscious of things that are happening and not to dive in the way I would have done and taking the blame and feeling guilty and feeling shame. That's kind of gone. You know what I mean?
Huge. Yeah.
That is huge. That was for me anyway.
Okay. But before we move on, Joyce, how much education do you have? What do you do for work, or what have you done for work?
Well, we all left primary school. We never went on to secondary. I think I was there for a few weeks.
I don't know what your equivalent of primary and secondary is over there. It's high school. It's different for you. Like June and Joyce would have left school before they were 11, 12.
No, I was 12.
12. And I left school when I was about 14. And I was probably the only one who stayed in school as long.
Smart.
Yeah, no. And still am, let me tell you.
Yeah, but see, it's like that. That was Paula's tool. She used
Her heads.
education to bury herself. It wasn't she wasn't bright for the right reasons. Like
Bright for the right reasons.
yeah. It wasn't that she was dead clever. It's just an avoidance thing. So that's as far as I went. I started work when I was 12. We actually had a grocery store. So we
As a family grocery
It was
store?
attached.
Okay.
It was attached to the house.
That was
I see.
another way my father could hold all the family together and control everything.
So he was the boss as well as everything else.
So we worked for him right up to the time he actually was imprisoned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Okay.
And we also did other jobs. I mean, we did everything. We did waitressing, we did catalogs, we did
Tupperware parties.
yes. And then my father diversified. The shop wasn't doing so well, so he diversified to making soft toys.
Teddy bears.
And we had a successful enough company going there right up until the day he was in prison. The shop was long gone. But over the years, he experimented with everything, a chip shop and everything. We tried for a while.
Until he killed everybody in the neighborhood.
No, but I mean, we tried selling clothes. We've
Always worked.
Yeah.
Always worked.
But it was usually, we believed we were stupid. We had no
Written
credentials. We'd no,
like you couldn't ask the outfit for a reference.
yeah, we'd no
Okay.
references, we'd no certificates. So we
Still?
only went for jobs.
Okay, I thought you guys...
Now we have our degrees, but
Yeah,
at the
so I
time,
want to hear about Joyce's. Joyce, what degrees do you have?
I had a degree in community development and leadership.
That's freaking huge.
yeah, I had that one as well.
I have
Okay.
leisure management.
Okay, you guys, sisters, we gotta let Joyce, we're gonna take turns. Joyce.
Molly doesn't know how to do that. Right, so I have that, and I have a degree in, oh no, it's not a degree. What have I got in Orsoma and
Holistic health.
reflexology?
Reflexology. Okay, because I want people who are currently in horrible situations to have hope. Because I think it's common that abuse survivors either feel very stupid or they throw themselves in school, like school is the safe haven for them. So I want people to have hope. And so you were able to finally believe in yourself enough to get a degree. And what kind of work have you done with your degrees, if any? I don't know.
Well, I've worked in the community now for over 20 years, but I've just retired.
Okay.
So I don't do that anymore.
That's too much.
What did you do for the community deal? This is a time to brag about yourself.
I know, we worked in, myself and Paula worked in the Childhood Development Initiative,
Okay, yeah.
where, I mean, mine would have been, what was it,
Outreach.
community engagement officer, where I would have worked with the community people and introduced them to the police, the politicians. The idea was to make it very easy for them to see these people, they're just individuals. They can be approached. And, you know,
It was all about
some
breaking
of them
down
are nice.
barriers.
So it was really about building relationships as well, because again, this area I live in is very disadvantaged as well.
Mhm.
But you know, it's a great community as well. So that's what I did for over 20 years.
Awesome. Okay, sticking with Joyce still for one more minute.
Archer, you're the only one who's been able to separate. The only one.
So Joyce, of all this recovering and healing that you've done, what is one or two of the big things or small things that you did that really helped your recovery to heal you?
I think the biggest thing we did was writing the book. I couldn't believe the personal information and understanding I had of myself. And like Paula was explaining, like it was the first time ever I saw myself as innocent. Up to then, I would have felt we did this together. How can I accuse him of anything? There was two of us, because it's a very common thing with a sexual crime where the victim owns the most of it. And it's very clever, like, because we, in writing the book, we got to understand how he made us think that and believe it.
Mhm.
You know, come on, and we'll do something, you know. Oh God. But that was the best thing for me to actually, it was the first time ever I saw myself as innocent. I loved him. I did love him and I thought he was God. And anything he said, I would have never in a million years questioned. I just believed he knew better. He knew what had to be done and he had his reasons for everything. And to be able to see that clearly allowed me to look at myself. Now, it was also very painful because I didn't know who I was. I'm still struggling with that one. But I had a very clear role until we wrote the book. And then it wasn't clear.
Wow. That was
But
pretty
it's good.
powerful. That was pretty powerful, Cher. Thank
But
you.
I'm left alone, Paula.
Thank you, sisters, for allowing her to share her. Because if we keep interrupting each other, it's going to be really hard to get to a deeper level. Okay. So now we're going to let June go. And June, you have the floor. So I want to hear.
What was the question?
I'm going to tell you again. So June, my question for you is like, what do you feel like were your biggest struggles because of the abuse? Well, not even because of the abuse, because you've always had the abuse. So you can't separate any struggles you've had away from that, really. So, and I believe clinically and personally that trauma impacts every single area of our lives.
Absolutely.
So I want to hear in general, like what your major struggles were. What were your primary ways of healing? No, that was the third part. No, your struggles, your successes, and then, let's do a pause and then dive into how you did your healing journey.
The struggles really was self-hatred. That was the biggest struggle I had, and it was taking me down a very dark path. I did overdrink a lot, and I felt just before I met my partner, which I believe he was sent, I believe we made a prior arrangement to meet up, because if I didn't meet him when I did, I really feel I wouldn't be here. I was putting myself in dangerous situations. I was drinking too much. I was just with the wrong fucking people, and I hated myself, and there was nothing good I could see about my life. I just hated it, and I hated me. And that wasn't going anywhere. It really wasn't. And even when I met my husband, like he worked in a bar. So that was the end. Like, I mean,
That was heaven.
Yeah. It was daylight most times.
Heaven and hell.
Yeah, free drink.
So like, it wasn't until I got pregnant that the two of us kind of went, well, thank God for that. We can stop drinking, because he was just as sick of it as I was. But for the lack of knowing what else to do, you'd only attract somebody that's on the same level as you. So I'm not saying he had the same past as us, but not identical, but there'll definitely be a crossover. You won't be attracting people who are fully adjusted, you know what I mean? They'll have a certain amount of damage. And so we saved each other in a way. But the self-hatred was just, it was unbelievable. I used to say to the girls, I could nearly visualize it. It was like a big black hole in my body. I could nearly draw it. I knew where it was. I knew if I took a breath where to locate it. I didn't need to see it. I just knew it was always there. And as we began doing work on the book, slowly but surely we were chipping away. And I just come to realize one day I took a deep breath just to identify it, and I couldn't find it. And now that was years, but I realized that it wasn't a big blackness. It was an accumulation of every hurt, every time I'd been abused, every pain that I had, all culminated into this feeling of self. I'm going to cry.
Yeah, we're getting the moment. It's coming.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's the money shot.
Crying,
It's
laughing. It's okay.
Yeah,
We accept it.
The depth of self-hatred is just...
No, I really appreciate, June, that you're saying it, because that is a common experience for survivors, so if somebody else is struggling with that and they hear you express it as well, I mean, it's validating, and because you're doing better, it's hopeful.
Yeah. And when you start looking back at the past, all the pieces come together, and like, you don't realize that you're actually improving or getting anywhere. Sometimes it feels like you're just flogging a dead horse, but one day you turn around and you feel, my God, I'm not there anymore. I have moved. You just have to persevere with it. And I do believe, if we didn't get together and do the book, I can't even imagine where we'd be. Like, our heads were so messed up. We really,
and we didn't even have that awareness.
No.
You know?
Yeah.
We didn't
No.
have that self-awareness. We really believed we did our bit, took them to court, we wrote the book, we're done.
and we thought the first book was it. Like, you know, we just thought that took everything out of us. 20 years on and off of writing this book. How could you possibly have any more to give? And then when we took our lives, we would just say, how could we talk to him when he was doing that to us? And so we'd have a discussion on it. And then Paula would say, I'm going to just look that up now and say, and she'd come back and she'd say, there's actually a syndrome for that. You know what I mean? Stockholm syndrome, where you kind of befriend the abuser in order to self-preservation. And we were going, and not only that, but if you look online for any of the things that are in our book, we didn't invent the wheel, but anything that we came across on our own was backed up then by research
And science.
and not only that, in this research, we found it's all associated with sexual abuse victims. So which means it's been in the realm of, you know, people knew about this for years and years. And I got really upset. I felt like, why did nobody tell us? They would have shaved a few years off our self-hatred.
Yes.
If we'd have had, you know, if we said there should be a booklet they give you going into therapy with all this information on it, about the possible impacts on your life, about how there isn't a corner of your life that isn't turned upside down.
That's right.
And,
That's
you know,
right.
damaged, changed, interrupted, and, you know, negatively.
And in fairness, when we were researching the book to put the syndromes in and to put the conditions in, the problem, like you said, most people have been abused, really struggle with education. It's a real barrier. And
Not all though. Some of them
no, but
actually
a lot of people do. But a lot of the research that you see, or a lot of the conditions that are explained, are done in language that ordinary lay people don't understand. It's all medical jargon as far as anybody's concerned. So to actually take it out, pick it apart, and then say, well, what did that really manifest like in my life? What did it really look like in my life? That was the benefits we got out of it. And because the three of us would have been impacted differently, we were able to learn off each other. And it was because there was the three different views on something that really helped, because there's commonality, but there's also a lot of differences in how we managed it.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. So going back to June, what are your successes that
Oh God, what are my successes? I'd say my children.
how many children do you have?
What?
Person.
How many
No,
children?
they're my successes.
How many children do you have?
Three boys.
3 boys. Okay.
And 21, 28 and 30. And yeah, they are definitely my successes, because the pain that I was living in caused me to be stubborn, acted like I was full of pride when I was just dying. But I would have never committed to a relationship. I wouldn't have stood still long enough to find out who I was if I didn't have children. The very first pregnancy I felt, now, I mean, it didn't happen. It wasn't a positive event. When I found I was pregnant, I thought, fuck that, this is the end of my life. I can't run anymore. I'm trapped. I've nowhere to go.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But when I got over that, yeah, I absolutely thought they opened my heart for me. I wasn't able to do it because I didn't trust anybody.
Mm.
Jesus.
What kind of mom are all 3 of you moms?
No,
Paula isn't.
Okay.
no, I have 2 dogs. You can
Yes,
call
she,
that.
she may as well be.
Yeah,
because
they're worse than kids.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, June, what kind of mom were you? Are you?
Oh, well, when the kids, I had Christopher and Stephen, my first 2, very close together.
Mhm.
And when they were very young, all of this broke out, you know, and we started therapy. And I think that saved their bacon, because I think I would have just been lashing out, aggressive, cranky all the time. My husband and I used to say to me, Jesus, you never ring me giving out, you know, while I'm in work. Most of the people I work with get phone calls regularly from their wives. And I said, it's because I work on myself. Because believe me, if I didn't work on myself, you would be blamed on everything. Not that he doesn't deserve some blame.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, he would be blamed on everything,
Yeah.
you know.
Okay, so your children, tell us your degrees and what you've accomplished work-wise.
Myself and Joyce did the degree in community leadership and development. So, and I would say Paula was a big help for me personally getting through that, because I'd so little self-esteem that I'd say halfway into the degree before I would let her go. I depended on her so much until when I got to about a year and a half, and she was trying to help me with something. I was going, you don't know what you're talking. Give me that back. I had gone from, oh, just please help me, to get out of the way, if she didn't persevere with me, I wouldn't have made it, and then I couldn't believe it. I just thought, I actually can do this.
That's right. Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, that was, and I did it. I would have backed out if she wasn't there. I absolutely wouldn't have stuck it. And just due to lack of confidence, I also studied. We all fell into caring careers.
Yeah.
Like we all studied holistic health. We all had a passion for it, but running right alongside that passion is the lack of self-belief. And so you feel like, well, I personally, I can't keep talking for other people. I felt like a fraud. Like I studied acupuncture because I have a special needs son and I thought I could help him. Mm-hmm. And I stuck needles everywhere. I did loads of treatments. We, dedicated a room at home to just treatments, and I got great response and everything. But I always felt like a fraud, and I loved it when I found something. I thought, this is it. This is my calling. I'm never going to stop doing this. This is what I want to do. I'm so happy doing it. And after a year or two, I would just drop it. I couldn't stick at it because I felt they're going to find out I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm no good. And I would just do a number on myself to the point where it wasn't worth it. I just felt like, oh no, look, try something else.
So we call that imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you feel like
another syndrome.
Yeah. Okay. So are you currently still working in your field, or have you retired as well?
I stopped in about, I think it was 2013, and I'm a carer for my son, which is it's a full-time job.
Full-time job. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing. What do you think was the most critical piece of your healing journey? So anyone that's starting their journey, what would you recommend?
There's no doubt, if you're not as fortunate as us to have sisters, if you had other victims, because it'd be great if you can speak to somebody professionally, but if even that isn't your choice or you don't want to for whatever reason, mm-hmm. if you can sit with other people who've has similar experience, that they can totally relate and work together, like really it saved all of our lives. It gave us a relationship that we hadn't got prior to this. The way it worked, I felt we definitely gained Paula, because Paula had isolated herself to the point where we were on the outskirts. So it gave us back our relationship. And it helped me personally to know that I actually am powerful. I thought the way the dynamics went in our family, Joyce was God. That's why she was talking about being unsure of where she fit in at the end of that first book, because we started to grow. And it didn't mean that we still didn't consider or turn to Joyce in the way we had previously, but she didn't feel that. She felt displaced, and it was very triggering. It was upsetting for everybody because, the relationship dynamics were changing all the time. And then writing was even becoming difficult because you had three people growing to the point where they
opinionated.
Yeah, quite opinionated. So to get all three to agree on one sentence sometimes
could take us a week.
So it was a huge challenge, but I would say the biggest gift or the biggest
lesson,
to contributor to healing from sexual abuse was working together. It was definitely each other. You can't do it on your own. And I also feel being believed in the courts, even though I wasn't happy with the sentence my father got, mm-hmm. Being believed. So many people don't get that. And I think that in itself, that one thing on its own, if there was some way there has to be something we can do for victims that can't get justice in the courts. Because we looked into, what is it? Justice?
The start of
justice. It's a possibility, but it's just, they need some kind of validation. Anybody that I've seen that don't manage to get past the DPP in the courts, accepted to go through the courts, suffer worse than people that do. I don't know if that's making any sense.
Yes. Okay. So now it's Paula's turn.
We're going to interrupt all the time.
No, you're not. You're going to be excellent role models for your little sister.
Yeah.
So Paul, I want both eyeballs into the screen for YouTube.
Right. What was my biggest, I think the most difficult thing for me with the abuse and the way it impacted my life most severely was the social anxiety. And I know I'm talking here, it's no big deal, and I get up in front of an audience, it would be no big deal, but that isn't how I actually genuinely feel.
Mm-hmm.
So the social anxiety for me was crippling. It wasn't a little bit of a problem, it was a huge problem. So even when I managed to go out and be social, I used to coach basketball and I loved it. And I was a tyrant, but I loved it. But I felt I could do that because I knew what I was talking about. So like when I do something and I study really hard to do it, and I believe I really know what I'm talking about, it lessens the social anxiety. But then ask me to sit and talk to somebody socially, that's a very different ballgame for me. I'm not comfortable doing that. Even today, I'm not comfortable doing that. That would be the thing that's put me in a panic now. And even with all the work I've done, that's the bit I find the most difficult. Because I either do one of two things. I either go out and chat to somebody all night and then come back and have a post-mortem about what did I say that for? I'm not to doing that. That's saying I shouldn't have said this. I get diarrhea of the mouth the minute I'm uncomfortable or nervous. I just keep talking. And I look at other people who sit in a room and they're really quiet. They say nothing all night. And I long to be that person. But I just don't have that ability because I can't cope with that panic. So I think of all the things that affected me socially, and I went to college as well as a mature student, but to be perfectly honest, I went to the first college I went to for 4 years to learn alternative therapies and massage and aromatherapy, and I loved it all, absolutely loved it. But I didn't go to college to get an education, if I was to be honest. I went to college so I wouldn't have to go out and get a job.
And meet people.
And do all that shit. So then I set up my own, working from home, and I had clients, and like that imposter syndrome, I couldn't do it because, and I know myself, I was really good at what I did, but I couldn't do it. And for instance, I had an exam and I had to bring in a guinea pig while I was getting the exam. And I asked June to come in while I was doing an aromatherapy massage and being marked on it for my exam. You have no idea. It took me 15 minutes to get a drop of oil out of a bottle because I was so nervous and aware somebody was watching me. Whereas that wouldn't even happen if I wasn't being watched. I can't do the watching bit. So I went and I did all those therapies, and even at the end of that, I set up my own, and that didn't work for me because I just felt like, how can I tell people to go out and look after themselves when I'm smoking and drinking, and I certainly wasn't mentally capable of doing what I was doing. So then I decided I still didn't want to get a job. So I'd go to another college and I'd get my degree.
Oh, that's how you got so smart.
So I went and I got my degree because some of the credits I had with the first course I could bring into the second one.
Mm-hmm.
So I went and I did leisure management and event management and all that. What was I thinking of? I don't know, because that requires you to be social, and I'm not social. But I did everything. I never did anything. The biggest trouble I had in college wasn't the work. I loved the work. They'll tell you I could do 24 hours a day studying, wouldn't bother me. It was the having to go in and sit beside somebody and have a conversation in those in-betweeny moments, or while you're waiting for a lecturer, or during the lunch break. So I used to drive in and park where it cost me a fortune, so that I had somewhere to go at lunchtime so I didn't have to sit with the class. And that just ruined, I didn't have a college experience. And then I had the problem when I came out and I had a degree, and even in the other things where we got distinctions meant nothing to me because I didn't understand anything I learned. Because I had learned it by rote, I'd learned it for an exam. I went in, I did exams in an hour. It's supposed to take 4 hours, I'm gone. But I didn't understand a single thing I put on a piece of paper. And you know that saying, if you don't use it, you lose it? Well, I lost a lot because I didn't use it after I did the exam. That was it. I'll tell you, I went in and did the Spanish oral exam. I can't speak 2 words of Spanish to you. I got a friend of mine whose son was in college learning Spanish to take a 15-minute presentation, and I learned that off by heart. I couldn't tell you what I said, what it meant, but I passed and I got the top marks out of class, and I don't even know how to say hello. So I did a lot of education. For me was a runner. It wasn't necessarily, like, I don't regret anything I've learned, but it was a distraction. It wasn't necessarily.
Why would you regret it? I can't remember.
So that was,
yeah.
Right, well.
What were your biggest successes?
What was my biggest successes? Publishing the first book. For me, that was huge because I didn't think we'd ever get there. We had spent so long doing that. I didn't think that was ever going to happen. And for me, the second book was in lots of ways more important than the first book. Success, other than that,
Self-awareness.
learning to get out of really bad relationships, that's a humdinger.
Yes.
Because I have staying power. Like I said, I'm not built for speed. So I can stay in something for a long time before I say enough's enough.
You're not on
I'm
your
the
own.
opposite of that. Like, see ya.
And because I don't like change, a lot of times it was easier for me to stay where I was than up and move. So that's probably, in fairness, when I think of where I am today, that's probably the biggest thing, was looking at where I was and what I was doing and deciding that's not working for me, and taking the little bit of courage I had and saying, right, I'm out.
That's huge.
When I had nothing to go to and I had nowhere to live, I still thought, I know, I've had it. And we are all very similar in the fact that we're all or nothing. We're either very invested or we're not there at all.
Yeah.
So that would have been a big thing.
So if you ever want to work on that, cognitive behavioral therapy helps with that.
Right.
What
More
is
therapy, cognitive behavior.
therapy?
Yeah. It helps with the all or nothing, the cognitive distortions. Like there's a
Yeah.
reason why we get them, and it's usually childhood crap and
Yeah.
why we get where we are. Okay. So what was the biggest part of your healing? Is that the books as well? Or is there something else that you tried that was really helpful?
It was the books, but for me, it was probably more the challenge and crap from these two. Because I never got away with, if you say something, you were challenged on it. And I am a runner, and if I can escape something, I will. But I couldn't because they wouldn't let me. So
Yeah.
that was probably the biggest thing.
It wasn't just, we weren't picking on it. We wouldn't let each other off.
No, it was the way we worked together. Was if you wrote something and you removed yourself emotionally from what you were writing, somebody would say, but where did you go? What was that all about? It was that challenge. That took me a long time to accept as a challenge, let me tell you. But that was the thing I think was the biggest. It's a bit like June said, you can't do this. I don't believe you can do this on your own. I don't care who you are. And I spend most of my life alone because that's where I'm most comfortable. That's where I run. But you can't do this on your own. You have to have people around you, and people who aren't afraid to call you out when you're not doing the work.
When you're isolating. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly why I created the membership that I have. It's a Healing Trauma Together community, and a lot of the work is going to be done in the forums, the chatting back and forth with each other to help each other.
Yeah.
And one of the things as women are healing, I want them to be conscious of reaching down to help someone that's not as far along in their journey as you are. Yeah. So that's exactly, you're exactly right. It's much easier to heal and recover when we do it in a community.
It's also, one of the things I find is it's also can be much easier for you to see where you've moved by talking to other people and going, God, I remember being stuck where she is. And so it does actually help you to see your own progress when you're talking to other people.
Yeah, and it took us a long time. Even when we said we weren't victims, we were.
Yeah.
We still didn't get it. It takes a long time and repetition for the penny to drop sometimes. There's layers that it'll go to, and you feel like even forgiveness happens in layers. You think you've actually forgiven somebody or yourself, and you find another little nook or cranny that you didn't know about crops up, and you start to doubt your progress. What you're doing, you are chipping away at it, like that self-hatred I mentioned. You're chipping away at it whether you realize it or not, and you turn around one day. It's the kind of work that retrospectively you look back and go, oh my God, I actually have moved a great deal, but your head is a mess. You can't sort it out on your own. You can't.
It's very challenging to do for sure.
Yeah.
And the last survivors feel truly alone, right?
Yeah.
And also therapy in itself can be really difficult if you're not either ready for it,
Right.
if you're pushed into it,
Right.
or if you've the wrong therapist, and not knowing that you have a
Right.
choice to say, hang on, this isn't working for me.
Mhm.
When they will sit there and say, if you really loved yourself, you'd be here.
But it is a starting point. and it did help us. It put us on the road to recovery. And again, like the court case, it was early days when we did our therapy. So it was a lot of
new.
experimental.
It's very new.
We were like guinea pigs. They were only learning on us. And when we look back on it, they did get some things really wrong. But they did put us on the road. And when we finally started to work on ourselves, everything we'd done before wasn't wasted. Everything contributed to pushing us forward and going, that's what they meant when they said integration is important. And like, we did get some of the information. Now, we didn't get the required information. We didn't get all of the stuff that, like even the post-traumatic stress disorder, how most victims are diagnosed with that. And we're going, well, like people who see the worst atrocities in war have that. And yet they're comfortable to assign that to victims of sexual abuse, but still not give the crime itself the credit that you would give.
Weird, right?
Yeah. It's like they'll acknowledge that you have what war veterans go through, but the crime itself is not given the same strength. And, you know, we personally, that particularly with child sexual abuse, the crime is tantamount to murder because, you know, by the time, like we're not finished. We still have work to do. We do believe we've done a great deal of work on ourselves, but we're not finished. And, you know, it is a life sentence for a child because once they're under 7, for example, their brain connections are altered, their personalities are changed. Everything about them has changed. You've practically murdered a human being because that person is gone.
Right. No, I agree that justice isn't where it needs to be yet. Yeah. Okay, so we are way over time, which is fine because there's 3 of you. But I do have to wrap up because I have a client waiting. But I want you all to have a chance to, you know, each go around and say one piece of wisdom for someone that's suffering right now, like something inspirational. And it doesn't have to be a big thing, like no pressure, like one inspirational piece of advice or suggestion for a survivor. I'd like you each to do that. And if you don't quite feel like you can do that right now, it's okay to email it to me later. And I'll put it in the show notes on the podcast later. So if you feel pressure, it's okay.
I think the most important quote in that book is about the pain drawn energy in. Can anybody remember that?
Yeah, it's just a realization that we found through our process is that pain draws energy in, whereas empathy and forgiveness and draws it outwards. I suppose the most important thing is really be kind and gentle with yourself. It's a journey back to find out who you are. But
it can be done with kindness.
Yeah.
And it needs to be done with kindness.
And remembering that the one thing that all abuse victims have is that feeling of being alone. And when you get connected to other people who have experienced abuse and you realize you're actually not alone, that can move mountains.
But I think more important is to feel normal. We never felt normal.
Yeah.
And to realize no matter how you reacted, it's normal and it's okay.
And I would also say for most victims, their spirituality has been ruined for them, or at least damaged. And we found the further along our journey, the more inclined we were drawn to spirituality, to love each other, to be kind, to find forgiveness. All the good stuff started coming up the further we went along. And particularly directing it towards ourselves, something we wouldn't have done before. And that's vitally important. You just start to see the possibilities of a good life at the end of it.
And probably remembering that if you go around your whole life and all you ever experience is self-hatred, if you block all the bad memories and the bad stuff and the pain and the anger, and then you also block all the good stuff and the love and the joy and the friendship and the compassion. Like, you can't block one and have the other one freely roaming around. That's the point of going back and dealing with the awful stuff, is to free up that space within you to be filled with the good stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, she's in a hurry.
Okay.
Is that your job?
No, but she's
We'll
in a hurry.
Yeah, she's a little compassionate. Look at her. I was thinking about it being.
She asked for a fucking word.
I wasn't asking for the 3rd book today, okay?
You got it.
No, everything that was said was beautiful, but Joyce, did you feel like you got to say what?
Oh, she's going to say it.
No, I got that again.
You'll get back to me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. I think the 3 of you are beautiful. inside and out.
No, you're not
Thank
too
you
bad.
so much.
We'd like to send you a copy of the 2 books if you pop us an
Oh my-
email with the address.
Oh my God, I would love that so much. And I don't mind going on. I felt guilty for not buying them yet.
No, honest to God, I just
Yeah.
need a proper address. You email me the address and I'll send it to you.
Okay, I will definitely do that today.
Brilliant,
Um,
brilliant.
And I will also send you guys a copy of some. I haven't written my own book yet, but I've written contributions and other
Right.
books, like pieces of my story. So I will
Cool.
do the same. Okay.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies, so
Thank
much
you.
for being with
Thanks
us
a million.
today. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening in today. Please join us next week, same day and time. Also, I would love for you to check out my website, healthrivedream.com.